This is the Troutbitten Podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout. This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten Podcast, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Dominic Swantowski, the owner of Troutbitten and the author of troutbitten.com. All right, we're back in the groove here with Season 3. My friends and I are ready to talk about the inefficiencies that steal our fishing time. There are so many tasks that take our focus and our dedicated time away from the actual fishing while we're out there. So it's well worth thinking about how to sort of streamline things. Casting, drifting, swinging, and stripping, right? Everything else is downtime. Like Paul said, brother, there are no flying fish in Montana, or anywhere else for that matter. Hey, that's 2 weeks in a row we got a river runs through it reference. Flies in the water, that's where we want them. A trout on the end of the line, that's what we're aiming for. But there are seemingly endless tasks required for a fishing trip, and how we approach those chores really defines the way our day will go, simply because our fly is either in the water or it's not. How we prepare the night before, our system for carrying tippet, our strategy for choosing the next fly, and even what we do with the net after releasing a trout, what we do with our time on the water matters. And all of us experience that nagging feeling that something is amiss, that so much more is possible on those days when we know that we are inefficient. Fly fishing is for the pragmatist. Successful anglers see failure and make the changes to turn it around. And no matter what our natural tendencies, whether we're a neat freak or a slob at home and at work, the river quickly teaches us that the only way forward is through efficiency. So every long-term angler that I know, and I mean every long-term angler that I know, becomes efficient, even if they weren't born that way. All right, before we jump into our topic, let's say hi to the guys in front of me and answer a couple questions from listeners. I'm joined tonight by my favorite fishing friends, Trevor Smith, Bill Dell, Austin Dando, and Matt Grobe. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Hey. Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
I like how you listed us in priority of who you like the best.
Well, I try to mix it up.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like I'm playing favorites.
I'll take second place. I'm good with that.
I do have my favorite.
My favorite.
It's a secret, though.
Yeah,
Don't
right.
burn
That's
it.
right. It's a secret.
Respect it.
Don't even tell your dad.
Don't even tell you that. Maybe you'll share it with us.
Yeah.
I might share it. My favorite's laying on the bed behind me there, the dog bed behind me.
Mm.
Yeah, there you go. Sure.
Hey, Bill, you had a pretty solid week out there on the water, didn't you? You kind of had a little mini vacation, a little spring vacation.
Yeah, it was good.
Spring break.
I did. I had, I think I fished or guided 14 of the last 18 days. And
Jeez.
so that was nice. Be out in the water.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good time. Got to fish with Trevor a
that was
little bit.
good.
That was good. I listened to the podcast on the way back home from camp. Liked it. That was good. I can't say I disagree with too much of it.
Oh, you have some thoughts on spot burning?
I do have one thought on spot burning. So one thing that you guys didn't talk about was when you're fishing with friends, we talked about you guys had talked about kind of the process of trusting someone. And so early on, I started to get burned by that because I would fish with people and I'd be like, oh, let me take you to this spot. And then they would go back and abuse the spot.
Yeah.
And so I would say, one thing to kind of keep in mind, if someone's nice enough to share their spot or share the information with you, don't abuse it.
Well, like Matt said, there's tiers of friends, right? At first, it's hard to know what tier that new friend is going to be. Well, no new friend should jump up a tier. They got to earn it.
That's right.
Yeah. And I was going to fish Laurel Run today, but you burned that bridge. So
it was packed.
Couldn't stop there.
Oh,
It
Laurel
was
Run
packed.
was packed.
It was
The day of the Troutbitten podcast launch in Laurel Run was packed. Thanks a lot, Troutbitten guys.
Shoulder to shoulder.
All right, hey, as promised, we'll answer a few more of these questions from listeners this season. Thanks for getting in touch with these. And if we don't answer your question here, I usually answer it personally. Many of you know that I can most often direct you to one of the 800 Troutbitten articles to help answer things more in depth. But Austin, will you read this first question, bud?
Yeah. So Kira in Abington, Virginia asks by email, love what you guys are doing. It's helped me a lot and my friends. Question for the Troutbitten crew. I fished some new waters in New England over the winter, had a lot of trouble locating fish. It was my first winter of fly fishing, but now I see why no one else was out there. It was really hard. Trout are finally starting to bite again now that it's March, but now I'm back in Virginia. Do you think better activity has everything to do with water temperature?
To a little bit of an extent. Depends how, like if you're talking, I would say water temps under 38, I think the fish do become extremely lethargic.
Yeah.
Trevor, I think Trevor has some good science that he remembers from that.
No, I just referenced that when I was looking at the heat side of things in reference to our discussion last summer, those same curves drop off after 38 degrees on the bottom side, and then it was like over 68 degrees or so on the upper side, where trout's metabolism really does. In one side, it shuts down. On the other side, they just go into kind of preservation mode. But yeah, they certainly don't feed a lot under a particular temperature. And 38 seems like right around where it was, 36 to 38, somewhere in there.
New England, freestone streams, I would assume.
Yeah, right.
If it's not a tailwater, that's tough. That's just tough.
It's cold.
We addressed a lot of that on the winter fly fishing podcast, we're second to the last of season 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. That's why we're blessed here in Central PA, with lots of limestone-fed streams, much more consistent temperatures, and that's why our fish are more willing to eat, I think.
I would say advice would be find some slower water, experiment with flies. Sometimes in the winter, you got to use something bright and egregious to get them to motivate to move. Maybe for
What's
advice.
it like out west there, Grove?
How about you guys?
Well, I want to go back to my Madison example because I've spent so much time there, and that's one of the oddities out here. I find that the fish are just incredibly active out here in the winter, and we get harsh winters, and I think some of the best fishing I've had on that river is in the winter, and there's no slow water. I mean, Dom, you've been there. You guys know, a lot of you have fished it. I mean, close your eyes and it's the 50-mile riffle.
Right.
So there's no winter water, right? I mean,
right.
Now they seek refuge behind boulders and bank water. But
they'll find their slow stuff.
They'll find their slow stuff. But they don't have any deep holes to reside in. I mean, that river, 3 to 4 feet deep. I mean, it's not very deep. And so
what's the temp in the winter?
About 36,
No
30,
kidding.
34. But here's the thing.
You've still had some really great days. A lot
excellent
of
days. But I think one of the differences is the water temperature is consistent. And I don't know what factor that plays in to freestoners, and you have this constant variation in temperatures throughout the day. And you guys know what East Coast weather patterns are like in the winter. You could have some cold days, and then you could have some mild days, and that water fluctuation, it's pretty drastic. Once out here in the Madison, I mean, you hit December, and it's the same temperature for 4 months. I mean, and it doesn't vary. And I think those fish get themselves into a very consistent feeding pattern because there's not much variation in the water temps. So I think that could have something to play.
That's good stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Hey, let's move on. Trevor, do you want to read this next question?
Yeah, this question comes from Holden on Instagram, and he says, hey guys, here's a quick question. How do you find the good streams that aren't in the guidebooks?
Give it to me. Give it to me.
Anything on a map labeled Matt's Creek fishing.
I like that. It's good.
Shut up,
There
Bill.
you go.
Shut up. Don't give it away. Damn it.
I think it depends what you're fishing. Like brookies, I like to fish brookies, and so I look for remote streams. PA has good documentation. Other rivers don't, but usually gradient will help you, or just like the terrain around it, at least in PA. Yeah. So like if you're looking to find some wild trout, I would start like in a more mountainous region.
State forests and things like that.
Yeah, state forest. I always try to look, if I'm going to explore and try to find some new water, I'm going to find an area that has maybe 4 or 5 streams, so that if I drive there and stream 1 is posted, I have a backup, then I have a backup to that because
good.
But in the same sense, if, stream 1 sucks, then I have a backup too. And so, that'd be my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think you just have to be brave about it. You have to say, all right, I might not catch fish today, but my goal is to explore. And I did this a lot before, especially before my kids were born, and before life got more complicated. I had a DeLorme Atlas. I had, later on in the game, I had the Google Maps, and, I'd get and I'd have a full gas tank. and I seriously tried to fish everything within like 100-mile radius of my home. I live in a very trout-rich region. There's a lot of trout just about everywhere you look. But I also grew up in Western PA, and I kind of did the same thing when I was finishing school back there. You just have to be willing to not catch numbers, that's for sure. You're out there to explore. And like we said, go to state forests because you're going to have access. Like Bill was saying, you need to have a backup plan. And probably the thing that discouraged me even more than the few times I wouldn't catch a fish or wouldn't find trout was that I would constantly, on some days, run into posted water. Here's the next no trespassing sign. That can be frustrating. The last thing I'll say, in addition to those other 2 resources, I also, in our state, I had the wild trout reproduction list from the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. And that's not just Class A, it's Class B, C, and D. Back then, they even had B, C, and D listed, what they were. Now they just have reproduction. So there's Class A list, and then there's B, C, and D, but that's all grouped together. Anyway, I don't know what state you're coming from, Holden, but you probably have a similar resource. Anybody else?
I would say it's a 1 in 10 deal. Like maybe one of the 10 streams that you start to explore will be special. Maybe it's 1 in 15, but you'll be like, whoa, like 1 in 10 is going to be good and just be something different that is really enjoyable that might be off the radar.
Right on. But like 9 in 10, I found that would actually hold a few fish, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but you're saying like the special one that you want to come back to, ooh, I really found a gem. Yeah, that's cool. Like 1 in 10. Yeah.
One practical way maybe to sum this up is there's obviously maybe some famous creeks around you or the most well-known spots that have cold water and wild trout living in them. Chances are there's a lot of tributaries that are offering that cold water to that stream.
Good point.
And if you're just looking for a starting place, look on Google Maps and see what dumps into it and go hike up them one day.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
I noticed that Grobe over here doesn't want to really give any tips about how to find those special waters. That's all right, man. That's all right. Holden can just, wing it. Let's move. No. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable.
It's all good.
All right, seriously. Let's jump into our main theme here. Let's talk about the inefficiencies that slow us down. Really, they don't just slow us down. They take away fishing time and our enjoyment of the whole experience. I know when I'm wasting time, I just can't stand it because we only have so much fishing time. Nobody gets to their end of the life and says, I've fished enough. Not many of us anyway. As I said in the intro, good fly fishing kind of demands that you have a system for things. And let me mention, in future podcast episodes, we'll really dig into some of these systems, like how we store and carry our gear, sort of the pack versus vest debate or whatever else, however you carry your gear.
Lanyard.
There you go. We'll get into all of that. Hip pack. Okay. What else? Did I miss something?
Chest pack.
Chest pack. There you go.
Sling pack.
Anyway, we'll get into all that. I promise. Those are going to be fun episodes too. But for this episode, let's focus on calling out these inefficiencies. Let's highlight them. And sure, we're going to offer a couple things that we've discovered to help streamline a process. But mainly, we'd like to just spotlight as many of these time wasters as we can, because maybe we don't all recognize them. Because I know that a lot of these went unnoticed in my own game for decades. I mean, decades. I've fished for 20 years before I realized that there's actually a better way to put your waders on and take them off. And now I kind of have a routine for it. Maybe we'll talk about that. Before I finally recognized, and I did something about that. And I'm still working every day, really, on being just a little more efficient, because then I can fish more. I don't waste time. So just recognize what wastes time is the first step. And that's what we'd like to talk about tonight. Do you guys all agree that good fishing requires being efficient?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I'll agree with you on that point.
Do you think that you are efficient people at heart in nature?
I am.
You're a spreadsheet guy, Bill. That's a given, right?
I think that I'm not. I don't think you could look at my life and say I'm like efficient in every category of everything I do. But in fishing, efficiency means more time fishing, like you said. And so the motivation is in the right place to be efficient.
You probably learned that with hunting too, right?
Big time. Yeah, and I'm probably more polished from an efficiency standpoint in hunting than I am fishing.
I'm sure a lot of that carries over too.
Yeah, it does. A lot of it carries over, especially when it comes to gearing up and gearing down. Like that part of the process to me is so intuitive.
Austin, are you an efficient dude?
I think so. I have a tendency of doing things the hard way. But within that, I try to do challenging things as efficiently as I can.
Austin made me the most efficient French press coffee on the stream bank that I've ever had. And it was amazing.
That's a good way to put it, Austin. That is the hard way to make coffee on the stream.
You know what I mean?
French press.
It's like hard, but he did it so efficiently. It was beautiful.
I certainly don't go through life looking for the hardest ways to do things. It's just my tendencies.
You find them. You find the hard ways. Matt, are you an efficient dude?
I am definitely efficient at this point in the game. I mean, I definitely think I've gone through a lot of inefficiencies through the years. That's allowed me to now become an efficient beast when I want to go out on the water. But I think I still, through
efficient beast,
an efficient beast. But there's still times.
What about regular life? What about your home? Are you efficient? What's your workbench look like?
It's very clean. I mean, I have drawers for all my dubbings and hackles, and when it comes to that, I'm pretty efficient. My wife leads a efficient house as well, so
nice.
I'm definitely efficient, and I think it translates well to the water.
Nice. So basically, I think it's me and Trevor that are not necessarily in the rest of our lives real efficient. I'm not. I said the workbench. You guys have seen my workbench when you come before we leave in the morning. It's a mess. It's not the most important thing in my life. There are a lot of things in my life that I wish somebody would take care of for me because they're a mess. But man, my fishing gear is ready. And let's talk about that stuff. Water is essential for life, but for Orvis, it's the blood of the brand. Orvis has been the leader in fly fishing since 1856. No other brand can match the explorative and innovative spirit they bring to the water today. Everything at Orvis is about inspiring and empowering adventure and wonder in nature. Rooted in the vitality of fly fishing, fueled by passion and curiosity for the outdoors, Orvis designs and develops products and experiences, providing the knowledge and expertise to enable more meaningful moments and connections in nature. With over a century and a half of experience in the field and on the water, Orvis seeks to ignite that passion in others.
Tactical Fly Fisher was started in 2015 by Fly Fishing Team USA angler Devin Olson, with a mission to bring American anglers the techniques and gear that dominate the international competitive fly fishing scene. While you may have no desire to compete, you can still benefit from the same strategies which competitive anglers use to make them more successful on the water. Whether you want to buy a euro-nymphing rod, a stillwater fly line, or just some hooks and beads to fill your fly box, we've got you covered. And our teaching materials will help you learn how to use whatever products fill up your cart. Head on over to thetacticalflyfisher.com and use the code TFF10 to get 10% off flies, fly tying supplies, or terminal tackle.
I'll say this again. This is like one of those Troutbitten mantras. If it isn't easy, you won't do it.
Yeah.
And I've said that before on this podcast. I've written it probably a dozen times on the website. If it isn't easy, you won't do it. And as fishermen, man, I think that's true for every one of us. For me and Trevor, the slobs. But right. Then for you guys, the spreadsheet guy, even like that makes sense to Bill, right? But for all of us, if it isn't easy, you won't do it. You're going to avoid it. If you don't have a system or a routine for these things, and if you feel like, I'm wasting time, you're not going to do it. All right, so really, in no particular order, let's just run down some things, not spend a whole lot of time on any one of them. But, what are the things that steal away our fishing time? What's inefficient?
I would say fly organization. I'll pick on Trevor. He can explain how he fished this weekend because he didn't have time.
It's not good. I didn't have, so I was a good example of inefficiency. I just threw my pack together kind of last minute, didn't have time to prepare. I hadn't unloaded it from the last trip. I had a lot of flies that weren't organized. I had Ziploc bags of flies. It was like the worst case scenario.
What are you doing?
And the entire time, I wasted probably half an hour digging through that pack, and it got worse as the day went on because stuff became more and more disorganized. It was brutal.
I've never seen you like that.
Yeah, me neither.
I've never been like that. Was the first time I've ever.
What happened? You switched packs or something?
I did. Boxes? Well, I had unloaded my pack because it got doused when I was out fishing in the rain, and then when I was loading it up again, like I had a bunch of flies that I wanted to fish with, but I didn't have time to put them in a new pack or a new fly box, and I don't know. It was just it was a combination of things, but I'll blame it on having 3 kids and just I put off the organization, and I really paid for it because it cut directly out of my fishing time.
That's a big one. I mean, that's
a big one. My night fishing pack is probably the most organized, streamlined, efficient thing. Yeah. I can use it with my eyes closed. Everything's in the right place, and I really enjoy that a lot. So organization of the flies within my fly box.
So you have a dedicated night pack.
I do. And that is part of my efficiency, I'd say, because I night fish so much that it really gets a lot of use, and I don't like unloading and repacking the same pack.
Yeah.
And at night I have some different, and I think this is part of the thing we'll talk about with efficiencies too, in terms of our packs. Everybody's got a favorite place to have different things. And I always know that my nippers are going to be like on the top right side of my pack. And so I can just reach for them blindly, right? And I know where my forceps are. I know where, and in my night pack, I actually even have 8, 10, and 15 pound tippet / leader stuff threaded out through 3 different holes in the front of the pack. Nice. And I know which one's which, and I'll just pull which one I want. So yeah, just everything is exactly where I want it. And I think that's probably what we should all be shooting for, is sort of like the ability to know where everything is in our pack or a vest without looking down.
You and I talked about that, Trevor, when we were night fishing this last summer. I said, I'm almost to the point where I'm going to do what you're doing. A totally dedicated night vest or pack, because it's really the only time where my gear changes that much.
Yes.
Now I haven't done it. And honestly, I probably won't, because for me, my pack, I'm a vest guy, but I've been using the same vest layout, sort of that traditional layout. I don't want to try to describe it. You know what I mean? When you think of a fishing vest, and I'm using a Sims one right now, and everything's been in the same place for so many years. My split shot, my nippers, my forceps, my streamer box, everything, my tippet, everything has been in the same place for so many years. No matter what vest I have, it kind of just takes that place in the new vest. And I could do it in a night pack because there's so many other things that I don't need, and then other things that I do need. I might do it. But that, you know what? I'll probably try it. Like I've tried so many times to whittle down the gear that I carry. But at night I could definitely get a little bit lighter in some ways. That matters, but then I feel like when I do that, I feel like I'm inefficient, because now all of a sudden I'm going, oh, wait a second, I'm wearing a different pack. Oh, wait a second, things are in a different place. And I just am most comfortable always having that same vest with the same gear in the same place.
But the inefficiency of switching, because for the longest, I still do it today, where I switch between pack and vest.
Yeah, I know you do.
You don't end up with things where you want them to be. I'm fishing, oh crap, I have my cider material in the other vest or other pack. And so that's probably my biggest weak point, is I switch between it. If it's going to rain, I don't want to fish this pack. I want to fish one that's waterproof so that my stuff doesn't get soaked. Or if it's this camera, I'll carry this. And so, Yeah, just switching back and forth. There's been dozens of times in the last few years that I end up on the river and I don't have nippers with me.
Yeah. I feel like trying out new gear or packs and carrying systems is like one of your hobbies. Seriously. It's like something I've seen you do often. It's like something you enjoy. That's all right.
You have leaders, I have packs, and we're,
Yeah, that's true.
We each
so
have
the
our
consequence
own,
of that,
vices.
really right on. The consequence of that is like forgetting necessary things. And that's what you said. Sometimes you're out there and you go, forgot my cider material. I don't even have nippers. So you forget those things at home or back in the truck or whatever. I mean, that's very inefficient, right? But we've all done that. Everybody listening has absolutely done that, right?
Yep. I used to be really bad at that. I think I've gotten better at it over the years.
The older you get.
To this more times I've had to learn the same lesson. But yeah, I'd get to the stream after a 45-minute drive and I didn't bring my boots. And like the moment you realize the thing you needed really badly isn't with you, it's just like your heart drops out from under you.
Yes. There may be nothing more inefficient than forgetting some item that you just can't be without. Like you have to have your wading boots. Maybe you could even go without waders if it's warm enough. But man, you have to
sunglasses.
So right? So many things. The sunglasses. You guys know what I'm going to say, right? Boots, box, bag, rod, vest, waders, food, drink, camera, net. That's it. And that's my checklist. I run through it. So guiding.
You guys lose too much stuff.
Well, not anymore. But so guiding has made me even more efficient. Man, it's my business now. I can't leave the house without this stuff. So I literally run through those things I just said and I touch them. First of all, I always pack the back of my 4Runner the same. I can look at it and see it. It's there. But I still touch it. Boots, box, bag, rod, vest, and so on. I touch it all. It takes...
Do you have a little song?
My little song, right. Little cadence to it. A little rhythm.
I like it.
Gets me ready to go, have a cup of coffee, get on the road. But I haven't forgotten anything for a long time because of that.
So I take pictures of stuff like when I leave camp.
Do you?
Because I'll be like, hey, Trevor, can you drive by camp and make sure I did this? And so now when I leave, the checklist that's done, I take a picture of it when it's done.
That is cool.
When I leave.
Some of my biggest inefficiencies on my end, I find happen when I don't spend at least 20, 25 minutes the night before really strategizing what I'm going to accomplish the next day. I find that you can cut a lot of unnecessary stuff out if you take a minute and say, okay, tomorrow, it's March. I'm going to fish a sucker spawn and something else. I'm going to rig my rod and I know I'm going to go after fish on a mono rig. And, I have a rod rack. I think Bill has a rod rack. That's been one of my most useful and efficient tools that I've bought in the last 3 years. Kid goes to bed. I go in my garage, prep the rod, and then I start, visualizing, okay, if I go to spot A, let's say I'm going to be able to go fishing for 3 hours when my kid goes down in the middle of the day. I'm going to have spot A, B, and C within, you guys live in trouty country. You got plenty of options, 20 minutes around. And if someone's parked at A, I'm not going to stop. And how many times have we all sat in that spot and that totally derail our plan? Like, oh man, this was my plan. Now what? Yeah. Now I kind of think through all those things. Sometimes my wife looks at me at dinner and asks what I'm thinking about when I'm not listening to her. And sometimes this is what I'm thinking about. But I find that to be a really efficient tool if you can kind of implement that into your game.
Yeah.
I like the point you brought up, Matt, about traveling and time. One of the things I think about a lot is travel time versus fishing time.
There you go.
And if I want to drive somewhere, it definitely matters. And I had to think about it a lot more when I lived in the South because stuff was far away. And you had to judge, well, if I leave the house at this certain time, I'll get there by then. But then I can only fish for 4 hours because I got to leave to get back an hour after that, especially if you have one place you want to go or one place available to you and you get there and there's other people. That is a total inefficiency to limit your options, but also just to make sure you're maximizing river time.
Yeah, so having your plan, your A plan, your B plan, your C plan, that kind of stuff can happen on the way there, whatever can happen the night before. what you're saying there, Matt, I mean, I kind of go through the same thing because I'm on the water every day. And when I'm guiding, I especially just have to be prepared, for anything and everything that could possibly happen. And it gets a little old, I'll be honest, like every night. What you said, about a half hour. It takes about a half hour for me to replace because I don't have enough Dorsey yarn indicators, more split shot, this or that fly. Yeah, so many things. You can fill in the blanks. I need more 6X tippet, whatever it is. And I need to run through those things. To be honest, I'm now a guy who has a note-taking app on my phone. And my mom would be amazed at that because she was always, you forget everything. And I was kind of flighty. Boy, not with fishing now. I write things down. As soon as I run, or I'm about to even run out of 4X tippet on the water, I actually get out my phone, tonight you're going to have to fill up the 4X. It's just the way it is. That's all right. Anyway, it's part of my business. But even before it was part of my business, it just because I love fishing, I don't want to waste time. It was what I did. And like you say, man, it takes a half hour. You guys feel like that? I mean, 15 minutes, half hour of a little bit of preparation.
Absolutely.
Yep. That's what keeps me awake at night, honestly, the most is I'll sit there and I'll run through the scenarios of, okay, I'm going to go fish spot A. What if somebody's there? Okay, I can go fish spot B, or maybe I need to go to a different river because it's Saturday. There's going to be too many people there. Yeah. Like I run through like the scenarios in my head a million times. And then especially it's even more of a strategy if it's like a time after work when you have limited time, because if you're driving 30 minutes and you have 2 hours to fish and maybe the next stream is like 20 minutes over. And so I might not fish the most optimal stream. I'm going to fish the stream that I know will not have any people in at that time. So I kind of strategize about where I park often. So I try to park in places that I won't get cut off.
Yeah, nice.
Like I know, hey, I can park and I can fish, because if I'm going to hop around in different spots, it's going to be inefficient because I'm going to have to drive maybe 15, 20 minutes between spots, where if I pick a spot that, this is the last parking and then it's, 2 miles of river, it's going to take someone to really work hard to get in front of me.
Parking is a strategy, and that can be efficient or inefficient too. It's like you kind of claim your spot. You're like, well, hey, there's only one that can fit here. And then like you say, there's 2 miles up.
Park in the middle of that 2-car spot.
Right? Go ahead, Trevor.
Well, I was just curious, as like a point for debate, what would you say about the argument between, like, do you pack your pack? And I think, Grobe, you kind of answered this before, and I thought it matches up kind of with how I fish. But Dom, I think, is on the other side of this argument. But do you bring everything possible so that you're prepared for every single scenario you could potentially encounter on a stream in a given day? Or do you bring the things you need to fish 2 styles or 2 particular ways really well, and you could really make an argument probably that either is more efficient depending on how you want to argue it. Good in point. My case, I think I try for bringing less things and just maximizing what I use those less things for, because I think of that as more efficient. But I've seen Dom be very efficient with a much more heavily packed system that allows him a lot more variability.
I bring everything I could possibly need almost every day of the year I fish. The thing is, though, I don't bring a lot of one thing. So it's not like I have a ton of dry flies or 3 boxes of streamers or nymphs. I've got a fair selection of each thing, so I never feel weighed down.
That's a good way.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Mm-hmm. I would say I'm pretty similar there, Austin. I want to be prepared for every variation, and that's part of what I just enjoy fishing that way. And when I'm guiding, that's what I want to be able to do, jump from one thing to the next. So like you say, Trevor, I'm prepared for about everything. But at the same time, I don't feel like my vest is like ridiculously weighed down.
No.
And there are
I do.
You're a lanyard guy now. But you won't be for long. Guy. You'll be back on a pack.
Hey, guy.
Yeah.
Oh, I've been lanyard for about 6 months now.
Lanyard, all lanyard.
All lanyard, all lanyard.
No, I like that stuff. I mean, the only time I really pare things down that much is when I'm going brookie fishing. And then it's just like shirt pockets, and pants pockets. Because usually or when I can, I'm not even wearing waders.
Yeah,
it builds character if you don't have the tools you need.
I like that. That's true. That's true. You're going to fish what you have because that's what you have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you'll fish it harder.
Yeah, I think it comes down to a mindset thing too. Like where are you at mentally? Are you in the mood to catch fish and be prepared for any way to do that? If I'm on a new stream or I have a 8-hour day, which is few and far between these days, I'll definitely have my pack that has everything in the kitchen sink in it in case I come across something that dry flies, streamers, nymphs, whatever. And then there's those days, kind of what you're saying, when I'm in the mood to catch cutties in a mountain stream, I have a different vest that has room for one box. And I throw that in there with my neoprene booties and then wet weight, and I don't care about anything else, right? I'm throwing dry dropper and that's July to August for me a lot of the times. Right. It just kind of depends on the mindset.
Precision Fly and Tackle is a family-owned business with a passion for the outdoors and a sense of adventure. They are anglers who enjoy every moment spent on the water with family and friends. Precision Fly and Tackle carries the widest selection of Euro rods, reels, lines, leaders, flies, and accessories. From the beginner to the advanced angler, Precision Fly and Tackle can outfit every angler, no matter the budget. Visit them online at precisionflyandtackle.com. Then use code TROUTBITTEN10, that's the number 10, for 10% off your order. Gear up with Precision Fly and Tackle for your next adventure. This episode is supported by Freestone Coffee. You'll love sipping on it, guaranteed. Freestone Coffee is wildly delicious and dedicated to the sport of fly fishing. All Freestone Coffee is fresh roasted for your order, and 5% of proceeds go back to conserving the streams we love to fish. Freestone is just getting started, and they love your support. Head over to freestonecoffee.com and use code TROUTBITTEN for 15% off your order. That's code TROUTBITTEN for 15% off your Freestone Coffee order. Love it or your money back. So we've talked a lot about packs and vests and how we change and what we carry and all that stuff, right? What are other things that really make us inefficient out there? You got anything else?
Yeah, one thing that came to mind was just how I was fishing a little bit with Bill this weekend too. I was all out of sorts, I guess.
Yeah.
But I find myself doing this when it's ironic because I want to make the most out of my fishing because I, haven't been out in a while or haven't been out in some time. So I cast too many times and I don't take the time to set my feet and to really like square up and choose very specifically where I want to drift. And so I end up throwing probably twice the cast, but with half the effectiveness. And I think it's like a hidden inefficiency because I'm getting a lot of casts out there. And yet like half of my drifts, I'm like standing between two rocks and I'm kind of off balance. And, my rod arm's just all over the place because I'm not stable. And I just get to the end of fishing like that. And I'm like, man, I did so inefficient in my presentations. It just feels unsatisfying, and it's just I need to break myself out of that. And I don't know if you guys can relate to that at all.
Every cast I make is excellent.
It's just a Bill quality.
It's just a Bill quality. Yeah.
I'm with you, Trevor. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about it before when you can kind of get to the end of the day and go, I didn't fish well.
Yeah.
And really what that kind of boils down to for me is I wasn't efficient. And it really is. Like you say, if there's too many false casts, I'm just wasting time. Right. If my transitions between tactics, if I was, tight lining these nymphs and I say, you know what, I need an indie here. If that transition took too much time, I can feel it.
Yep.
Personally, I can change leaders in about a minute and a half. I mean, I can go full mono rig to full George Harvey dry fly leader with the fly on in about a minute and a half. And when it's taking me 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I mean, you can chuckle about this and say, what's the difference? It's a minute, you're talking about 90 seconds. Who cares? But I care, and I can feel it. And then I start to go, I'm not fishing well. And then I'm not afraid, but I'm hesitant to make that next change. I don't like it. I don't like that feeling. So I get to the end of the day and I say, I didn't fish well. And it really means I wasn't very efficient out there. I'm surprised, really, as I look back. The older I get, the more I realize that so much of good fishing comes down to how much time you're saving or how much time you're wasting.
Mm-hmm.
I think the waiting staff really showed the value of it to me last weekend. Got out in the middle of a run. It was the fastest run in the river, and waiting staff got stuck. I pulled it. It popped off, and I was stuck with like 6 inches of a waiting staff, and the rest of it went flying down river. And so instead of walking back to the car, which was like 5 minutes away, I manned up and was like, "Oh, I can fish another mile river.
Right.
I'll be good."
Sure, you can.
And I was all over the place.
I hear
just
that.
inefficiency. Like my back was sore. I started grabbing sticks along the bank to use those as waiting staffs. Didn't go so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bring up the waiting staff, and I always thought that a staff would slow me down. And Matt, you were the guy who showed me that it doesn't. It actually speeds you up, right? I've written about this. I had the back surgery, and my first real trip back from back surgery, you and I went and fished one of your home waters back in Western PA, big water. And I was like, I'm not prepared for this. So I rigged up a broomstick and all that on a shoelace hooked to my belt. That sucks. That's not efficient, right? But I eventually learned from my buddy Paul Almquist the best way to rig up a waiting staff. And yeah, I've written articles about it. Maybe I'll even link them here in the show notes. I'm really open-minded about so many other things about trout fishing and fly fishing. Oh, you can do it this way, do it that way. I don't think there's any other better way to do it than the way that a lot of us do it, and the way Paul Almquist did it. And he showed me. Anyway, it's a gear keeper rigged real tight. There's no slop. I can seriously I don't have the waiting staff in my hand. I'm waiting. I'm going through the water. Oh, I start to stumble. I'll reach back there with my left hand. Boom. I know exactly where it is because it's right there on my left hip and back a little bit. I know exactly where it is. It's always there. I use it. I let it go. Boom. It goes right back. It's a very light staff. When I don't need it, then I fold it up. And for me, I store it behind my my fishing net, which is held by a Smith Creek net holster. But anyway, you find those kind of details yourself. The point is, like Bill said, that the waiting staff doesn't slow you down. When you rig it properly, let's say, the best way, boy, it speeds you up. And it is efficient. You can fish so much more water because you have that staff. It actually speeds you up.
I've started to keep an extra one in my car for when I guide.
Yeah, same.
Because a lot of guys are like, "Nah, I'm good." Right. I'm like, let's just put this on your belt, if you need it. And then at the end of the day, man, this was made it a lot easier to get around because our rivers are fast and they are slippy.
Yeah, and so many of them across the country are. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that goes into the how important is gear, right? To aid in our efficiencies. I mean, it's one of those things that even in the winter out here, if I don't have the right gear, whether it's the right foot traction or the right layering, and you're cold and you can't tie a knot and you can't tie a fly on, but you look upriver and your buddy's nice and cozy and he's banging fish left and right. That's all all goes into efficiencies and inefficiencies, right? I was inefficient. My buddy was efficient, and he was reaping the rewards of catching all those fish because he had the right gear. So that's a big part of it, in my opinion.
Dude, I hadn't even really thought about, staying warm, but you're right. Anything that takes you out of your focus for, I'm going to make this next cast right here. If you're thinking about, man, my hands are cold. Man, my feet are cold. Oh, man, I got to take a walk because I'm so cold. Or if you're too hot or whatever. Anything that takes you out of your focus just makes you inefficient.
There you go. You guys that guide, when you watch fishermen or just fishermen that come fish with you, what do you think is one of the most inefficient things you see them doing?
I'm gonna jump in before the two experts get in here, but I know from my
there are
standpoint,
no experts in fishing.
People fish the wrong type of water at the depending on what time of year it is. So you'll have take people out right now out here in Montana where you're coming off a long winter and you have people that want to jump right into the fast water, and it's just not time. I mean, it feels like it should be time. It's 60 degrees, but it's still, those fish are still lethargic at the tail outs. And I feel like there's a lot of wasted energy and wasted casts on the wrong type of water, depending on the time of year.
Nice. That's a good one.
See, I like this guy. I agree with him. I do think that's the
Western PA.
It's Western PA. That's where it's at. But yeah, I do. I think that's the biggest thing is learning to read water and to understand the time of year. And to be honest, there's no easy button for that. You've got to fish and you've got to understand it, and you got to spend time on the river at all times of the year to be able to say, okay, it's winter. I'm not going to fish the class 1 rapid.
Yeah. Another thing I see a lot is the tendency to cast too far, regardless of time of year or whatever. But, we always want to cast to the next riffle over instead of the one right in front of us. And our drift often suffers from that. And trying to reel that back like constantly throughout the day can sometimes be a struggle.
Yeah, I would echo both of those points. That idea of fishing, let's say, the wrong water for the type of the year, that certainly wastes time, right? I mean, if you're casting where the fish aren't, or let's say where they're not feeding, boy, you're wasting time. You're inefficient. Yeah. But how do we know? That's the question I get. Well, okay, you're telling me, Dom, that I'm fishing the wrong water. Well, how do I know what water to fish? I've been using kind of a concept that I call a change out spot. We don't always know. We can make great guesses, really, because we have some seasons on the water about where trout are going to be feeding, but we don't know for sure. And so we get out there, and the first thing I'm looking for is where trout are feeding most. Again, I think I know about where they're going to feed tomorrow, but I'm not sure. And it can obviously change throughout the day, and as the conditions change, the light changes, whatever. And so as I'm fishing the water, I'm looking for where most of those fish are feeding. And I say most because we acknowledge that, thankfully, trout do things in groups. You'll find feeding fish, many fish doing the same thing.
And you're basing that on where you catch them.
Exactly. And not just what depth, but what water type. Was it fast or slow, like we were talking about? So I start to determine, even if I don't care if I put it in the net. If I get response from a fish wanted to eat. If I missed him, or he decided that last second he didn't want to eat my streamer or whatever, when I get response, here we go. That's going to start to be data that says like, maybe that's my prime spot. Eventually, I start to pick out what I call prime water, what I'm thinking of as prime water. And anyway, when I get to that next piece of prime water, if it doesn't produce, if I get no hit, then I'll change out. And there we go with my change out spot sort of concept. I'll say, all right, I fished that well. For the rig I have on, I got the drift that I wanted to get. I got the look on the fly that I wanted to get. And yet, in this prime water, I got no response. So what can I change? And often it is the rig or the presentation more than even the fly. But anyway, I'll change something. And I'll stay right there. Don't move my feet. Go right back into the same water with my new rig, possibly my new fly, and sort of A/B test it. And that, to me, is a very efficient thing that I try to do. And I learn a lot from it, too. I'll say they wouldn't eat presentation A, but boy, wow, great, they're eating presentation B. That's one of the most exciting things to me that I get to experience on the water.
Good stuff.
I do that a lot to start the day.
Yeah.
Like what you're saying, like the A/B test.
Yeah.
If I sit there in a run and I change flies and I don't catch a fish, then that means I'm not going to sit there and do that for the next 3 runs. I'm just going to look for the dumb fish that wants to eat. Yeah. And I'm going to keep moving.
Yeah. Well, you move a lot. We've acknowledged this. And, there are 2 strategies. We call it cherry picking or full coverage in a podcast in season 1. That can be very efficient. Just, all right, I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to cover a lot of water. And yet just standing there in one spot and saying, damn, I know there's fish under here. I'm going to figure these fish out. That's another way to approach it. Either way can really be efficient, kind of as long as you have a plan.
Yeah.
You think we can catch fish, like have a day or a good day of catching fish while being inefficient?
Yeah.
Does being efficient mean catching fish, or how do we know we're being efficient? What's that mean?
Good question.
Good question.
I think you have to take the sum of, 20 days out on the water to understand if we all can catch fish when they're eating a pheasant tail at the head of a riffle, right? I mean, anyone can huck it out there and stumble across some fish. I think it's consistency. When you get out there and you're catching fish on a consistent basis, I think at that point, your efficient game's coming, into play, and you're really starting to dial things in. At least for me, that's kind of what I gauge my success on.
That's a good answer.
Nice, I like that. Yeah, consistency. Yeah.
I think sometimes when you catch a lot of fish, like if you have a good day, sometimes it'll highlight your inefficiencies. So like, let's say you're catching a lot of fish, and then you catch a tree and then you got to tie a knot. If you're not good at tying knots, you stand there for 15 minutes tying a knot, and then you're more anxious because you've just caught 4 fish out of the last run.
Yeah.
You feel rushed, and then you're like, okay, and if you can't tie that knot, then it compounds the issue.
Nice.
Yeah, right on.
Here's another inefficiency that I've experienced just the last few years when I first moved out here, was flies that I tied that may have been, tied for eastern waters, that didn't fish well out here. And I didn't realize it until I went out to fish the Mother's Day caddis hatch on the Lower Madison a couple years ago. And there's the lighting, because of the lack of trees, is like the oddest thing out here. Like, you've no trees, and if you're looking at one side of the river where the sun's setting in this riffly water, it's so hard to pick out your fly. And so I was spending evenings fishing, into that light, not being able to see my fly. And I mean, I shouldn't even have had a fly on my line, but yet I was forcing myself to fish. And so I'd come back and I'm like, whatever, the next year I didn't change my pattern, and I get out there, and man, how inefficient is that? You're at the bench tying the same pattern that used to work, that now doesn't work. And so I found myself being really inefficient until I finally would put some, pink widow's web on the top of these elk hair caddis. And it was like a game changer. All of a sudden I was being efficient with my fly because I could actually see the fish eat. And it's one thing out here. It's really, really hard at times to see your fly. I mean, that's a lot of bushy flies is good here. Your stimulators, a lot of visual aids with pink and white widow's web. And there's a reason for that. I mean, if if you're guiding someone in a drift boat, that's part of the game. How do you locate your fly when you're just hucking it out into this big river? That's all part of being efficient.
What you're saying is about being very intentional. You're thinking about, maybe you are staying up at night. Like Bill said, these are the things where you're thinking about. I think one of the real joys of fly fishing for me, and I think for you guys too, is that it does consume a lot of my life. That's a good thing, And so I am thinking about, I got this problem. How can I solve this? And I'm going to go through the other parts of my day, but there's something for my brain to chew on. The next issue that next problem I need to solve. And for you, it's that pink widow's web, maybe. You got that glare. Anyway, you're doing things intentionally, and that will make you efficient. You're discovering those inefficiencies and saying, I'm going to do this differently.
I've been through the same thing with some of the rivers around here and certain patterns. And once you get that glare, you need something to break the glare, whether it's so like I've started tying most of my caddis or most of my dry flies with like bleached elk hair.
Me too.
Instead of tying it with standard, because it pops. You can see it later in the night. If you want to fish a sulfur hatch, till later in the day, it catches a little bit more light than maybe your standard CDC or something. Like, it may look prettier, but in the end, if you can't see it, it's not worth a darn.
Right on. Talking about being intentional. The other thing for me is the routines. You know what I'm talking about. I have a way, when I get back to the car, here's one. I never anymore put my rod on top of the vehicle. I will not do it. You will never see me do it. I used to do it, and then I drove off with the rod on top of my vehicle 3 times. I'm going to say 3 times. I almost lost my rod that way. Luckily, I found it every time. But I won't do it anymore. And so my routine when I get back at the end of the day, or even as I'm setting up, my Forerunner still, it's like a manual lid for my, gas. Thank you. And so I just pull it out. I lean my rod right there. You can do it 100 different ways. You can put it against your one of your mirrors, or some guys have like a little magnet. That's a neat thing. It holds your rod on the side of the vehicle. Whatever your routine is, find it, do it. I have a routine for the way I put my waders on and take them off now. And again, this is kind of funny for me because the rest of my life is not like that. But I save a lot of time, make a lot more casts because of these little things that I like to do and have those routines.
So Dom, what's the reasoning that you don't have a rod rack?
I don't like the...
Not cool enough.
Right. Well, I haven't gotten my cool card. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm just curious because it seems like that would be right up your alley on top of that Forerunner.
Yeah. I really like having the rods inside, and I don't need 4 rods. Like you guys both got your double bangers up there, right? You got 2 double bangers. You have 2?
I just have a single that holds 4.
Well, Bill has 2 double bangers, so he's got 4 rods on top. Now, to be honest, I don't have a need for it. And I did the video not too long ago about how I break the rod, I split the rod in 2, and that is what I don't want to walk to the stream with a 10-foot rod strung up. I don't want to do that. So gotcha. Even if I had a rod vault, I'd take it out of the vault, and I'd want to break it down in 2 anyway.
You can get ones that you can break it down.
There you go.
That they hold.
That's
they
the
hold
kind I would
down.
do. That's the kind I would.
Troutbitten Christmas present. I know what I'm getting, Dom.
I don't want one. No, really. Having them, you guys have seen. I use that Smith Creek. I think it's called a rod rack. Smith Creek rod rack up top. You've seen it in the videos, and that's I don't know. It's worked for me for so many years too, and that's my routine. It's not better than anybody else's, but it works for me. Anything else, guys?
Yeah, we had a question on this last week about knot tying and how to get faster, and that's a big thing I see with less experienced anglers is just unwillingness to tie knots, and practice knots enough that you get good at it. And it should be, knot tying should be just kind of a no-brainer afterthought. It should be quick and easy, and there's no reason that should hold you back. And I see it hold back folks from changing flies, from retying a leader. And they have to kind of pull an entire new leader out of their pack. And so there's a lot of inefficiencies that stem from poor knot tying. So spend the time on learning your knots.
I mean, this sounds mean. There's like no excuse for not being able to tie knots.
No excuse.
It does. And you can make all the excuses to yourself that you want, or you can just sort of man up and say, I'm going to learn to tie these knots.
Yeah. You got to take responsibility for that.
I understand that, there's all kinds of reasons, but I'd say 99% of the people can say, I'm going to tie knots faster.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Put it in your mouth.
There you go. Anything else? Matt, what do you have?
So this is more of a message. Okay. Don't be late to your buddy's house if you have a fishing trip planned the next day, because there's nothing that makes life more inefficient for me than if you show up late. And on top of that, pack a lunch. Like, we don't need to stop at Sheetz on the way there.
Let's not go get
grab
a pizza.
A coffee.
Right.
And you have to use the bathroom. Like, be an adult and prep this stuff, because when you're coming fishing with me, I don't want to stop. We're going fishing. We're going to be efficient. So just think twice about that next time you are meeting up with your buddy and you throw their game off.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's another one where there's kind of no excuse.
It's a good one.
Especially, I mean, if your buddy's like routinely late. I get it, some of us have kids here. And I get it. Like, the kids will slow you down. You can use that excuse once. But if you're doing that 2 or 3 times in a row, it's on you now.
You're down on the tiered friend list immediately. Right. And you probably won't get invited anyway.
Next plateau, you're down. You've been bumped down.
You're reduced to no Matt's Creek info.
Exactly.
I choose to be annoyingly early. That's my thing.
I don't know about annoyingly, but I have noticed that you're early. I like that. It gets me on the ball. I'm like,
that's right.
Trevor.
There you go. Yep.
He's going to be there. He's also the guy that shows up with his waders
on.
Waders on. Waders on.
Talk about
Josh
efficiency.
did that the other day. He's like,
whoa.
whoa.
There you go.
He's ready. Then it makes me feel slow because I'm putting my waders on after we get there.
That's right.
Sorry, I'm hustling. I'm dying.
It only takes you 15 minutes.
Me?
Yeah.
All right, guys, thanks. Another great conversation. Appreciate you being here. Hey, the way you move on the water, the way you carry gear, and how you adapt has a big impact on your experience out there. So we all enjoy the scenery and the solitude. We love the sights and the sounds of a river. But when that novelty dulls a bit, the process of solving problems and seeing the results of our solutions is what keeps us in the game for a lifetime. The bare bones of reality stare you down pretty quickly on a river. You notice the parts you've neglected and the things you didn't think through enough. Any piece of a system that doesn't work stands in the way of progress, of both learning and catching. Fooling trout on a fly rod requires a host of elements to be in just the right place. And over time, we develop an intimate understanding of such things. So we either take deliberate control over our system, or we curse the resulting roadblocks of inattention. Efficiency is a style. There's artistry in the way a good angler puts the pieces together. A finely tuned system from an experienced fisherman is something to behold. They flow from tippet spools to nippers, from fly box to floating. Things glide in and out of pockets. Tools extend from retractors and return to position without thought, without chaos. There's a skillful rhythm here, a purpose and a cadence in the way we even move through the water. And while pieces of a system that work for one person may not be a good match for the next, there are some mistakes that just don't work for anybody. So find your system and be efficient. Austin, will you read us out?
Yeah, man. So remember, troutbitten.com is a free resource for all anglers. With over 800 articles, there are stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more. Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and the tags, too. Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten Podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a comment, because that really helps. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water.
Don't be late. Hey now.